Okay, hey Tim, how you going?
Hey, Pato, how are you?
Yeah, great, thanks. How good was that?
Yeah, it was pretty bloody good. I think there's a couple of nights I only got 2 hours sleep. I reckon some of the runners got more sleep than I did trying to keep up with it all.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that was just awesome. It was lucky I was doing night shift for a couple of the nights because I saw most of the day courses, which was just awesome how good the some of the camel work was and the coverage, I thought. But you went when you found those stats. Your it was like a kid on Christmas morning, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I'm a bit of a spreadsheet nerd and a data nerd. And because you can't watch every single hour, you can try, but you're going to have to eat and have a shower at some point.
Yeah.
Every time I stepped away, I'd come back and I'd grab the loop times and I'd chuck them into a spreadsheet and try and use that to see what had happened over the last few hours.
Yeah.
And it was really cool to see what trends popped up and what you'd notice about each runner, and then you'd know to look for it next time you're watching the stream.
Yeah, awesome. And I mean you captured pretty much everything I can think of, like not just lap times, but average lap times, like the difference between day and night loop times, um, like the spread of loop, everything. You've captured everything. So I guess yeah, let's analyze this data. And let's start off by just do you want to just give us the just the overall data about the race, like milestones and stuff like that?
Cool. So um, basic stuff. So backyard ultra is 6.708 kilometers per loop.
Yeah.
Um, the race, there were 75 entrants representing 31 countries. I don't know the numbers. That has to be a record. I don't think there's been a backyard ultra in the world where 31 countries have been represented.
Yeah.
Yeah, in 2021, there were 35 entrants in the same race. So it's quite a big step up for Laz to have that many people in his backyard.
Mm.
Uh, of the countries, USA had the most. They had 10 entrants. The mighty Aussies had a pretty solid team there with 7, which was, even though I knew there were a few Aussies in the race and I could probably name them, when you realise there's 7, that's quite a solid showing for Australia.
Yeah.
Belgium solid with 6 runners there, France with 5, and Japan with 5. That were the top 5 countries with participants.
Mm-hmm.
I looked at the highest average PB before the race. So obviously a lot of them got in on the at-large list, and it was their PB that got them in, or they've won their national champs. New Zealand had the highest average PB. It's not surprising when you think that it's only Sam Harvey there representing New Zealand. So 101 is the average, pretty high average.
Yeah.
Spain with 82, again, just one runner. And then we get into countries with multiple runners. Great Britain, 80.7, Japan, 78.4, Belgium, 76. So really solid numbers there from those teams.
Yeah.
And Australia was actually 9th. So 7 runners with an average PB of 69.1.
Yep.
I looked at, so there's a day loop and a night loop. I thought it was interesting. The day loop went for 11 hours and the night loop went for 13 hours, which was interesting. It wasn't that even split.
Yeah.
And to make the data nice and simple, started on loop 1 of the day. So it was a nice easy spread. Which loop do you reckon was the hardest, Pato? Night loop or day loop?
Well, I mean, I think it was, I would have, with that, look, I have seen the stats, but if I hadn't, I would still say it was the day course because of the heat and because the trail was tough.
Yeah. I was watching some of the highlights today.
Yeah.
And Laz, in true Laz fashion, said the thing about the day loop and the night loop is they're both worse. Because I think the night would be really hard because it's colder, it's dark, you're feeling a lot more alone. But the day course had all the technical stuff and the elevation. So out of all the DNFs, 48 were on the day loop, which is 64%. And then on the night loop was 27 DNFs, which is 36%. Interestingly, so when I say those DNFs, that's their last completed lap. So their last completed lap was on the day loop or the night loop.
Yeah.
5 of those night loop DNFs, so 5 out of 27, their last loop completed was the last night loop. So they either didn't continue for the first day loop or they timed out in that first day loop. So the day really, really took out the runners.
Yeah. Do you think one of the reasons for that might be because completing the last night loop is a full 24-hour and it's kind of like a milestone?
Yeah, there's stats on that.
Okay.
Yeah, there's some pretty interesting stuff. And I think if your average backyard ultra, you think most people would drop out at nighttime. It gets dark and they start hitting their milestones and stuff. I think it's interesting here because they ran over so many days, not hours. They ran over days that there wasn't really that milestone. No one was dropping out at 15 because they got their first 100. No one was dropping out at 24 because they got their first 100 miles. So.
Yeah.
The runners, so the average age was 41.3. Which makes me feel pretty good. I'm 42, so I'm pretty average.
Yeah. I love
it. Runner with most birthdays was Jen Russo with 57 birthdays.
Yep.
Youngest was Pat from Poland at 18.
Yeah. And he was an exciting runner to watch for that 34 hours too, wasn't he?
Yeah. Yeah. For an 18-year-old, I think usually when stuff gets tough, when I was 18, I'd give up. He certainly didn't give up.
Yeah.
For the age group, so breaking them out into under 30, there were only 4 runners under 30, which is 5.3% of the runners. There were 25 in their 30s, 35 in their 40s. So that was the most common age group to be in your 40s. Again, makes me feel pretty good.
Yeah.
And 11 in their 50s.
Yeah, even 11 in the 50s, that makes me feel good too.
Yeah.
I've got at least another decade in me. That's good.
And I think if you compared that to, your normal road run or even trail run, I think there's definitely a skew towards later in life doing really well at these races because these aren't just people who signed up, right? They had to qualify. They had to put in some big efforts to get there.
Yeah.
And it's the people in their 40s and 50s representing together over 60% of the field.
Yeah.
Previous PBs. So before running, there were 4 people with 100 plus. You could probably name them, Pato.
Yep. Sam Harvey, Bill Gore, Moran, and Evo.
Yeah. 72 plus, or 18, so 24% had done 72 loops but hadn't hit the 100. 56% had done 48 or more, so that's 42 runners, and there were only 11 who hadn't hit that 48-hour mark as a PB.
Yeah.
So 85% had already done a backyard and run for over 2 days straight, which is amazing. Again, certainly not your normal backyard ultra, right?
Yeah. Sorry, I just thought I'd say I heard Laz mention a few times throughout the race. It's easily the best multi-day running event field that's ever assembled.
Yeah, it felt like the Avengers, right? Like all the superheroes together in one spot.
Yeah.
And I know last time we spoke about the distance to travel. So we had all their hometowns, so I thought I'd have a look at who travelled the furthest. It was those from Perth. So a flight from Perth to Nashville, assuming they all had to drive from Nashville, 25 hours. South Africa was 22 hours. Melbourne, 21 and a half hours was the third longest. Closest, there were 3 runners from Cincinnati or really close to Cincinnati.
Yeah.
Harvey Lewis, one of them. It's just over a 4-hour drive, 273 miles, 439K. He could have run home from Bell Buckle, grabbed a snack, and then made it 2/3 of the way back with the distance he covered.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think the guys from Perth could have achieved that same feat. So performance, total loops, 4,217 total loops were run.
Yeah.
That doesn't count loops that were over time or partial loops, so there's a bit more in there. But the distance of that is 28,287.6 kilometers.
Wow.
You'd make it around the equator of the Earth.
Wow.
So the equator is 25,000 kilometers. If you started in Perth, you'd probably make it almost all the way to Melbourne, having already done a loop of the Earth. You'd go around and come back to Perth and still make it to Melbourne.
And that's just between 75 runners. That's pretty amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. If you put together a relay race around the world with 75 people, I mean, sounds impossible, farcical, but yeah, they achieved it. 28 out of 75 runners beat their PB, which I don't know about you, but that seems low to me.
Yeah, and look, I mean, before the race, I probably would have expected more. So, yeah, I would agree. I think that it would have a lot to do or something to do with the tough trail day course.
Yeah.
There were from what I hear, there were a lot of falls. Like that Indian bloke who went out after.
Yeah, Kartik.
Yeah, he fell. He's like the perfect example of someone who fell way short of their PB because they fell in the trail. And there would be others as well. Maybe they didn't drop out straight after they fell, but a couple of falls or a couple of slips here and there, it all adds up.
Yeah, I think it definitely goes to show the difficulty of the course.
Yeah.
Certainly wasn't an easy one.
Yeah. So
only 28 beat their PB. The average amount of loops versus your PB. So if your PB was 30, for example, and you counted how many loops you did in the run, you would have done 23. So 7 less. The average runner achieved 7 less loops than their PB.
Yeah.
Now, I thought that number was a bit low. I had a look. There's anomalies, right? So Kartik had a fall and pulled out early. Obviously, Brian Crawford had some medical stuff going on. He pulled out early, and then the heartbreaking story of Hendrick. Even taking them out, it's still -6.
Oh.
So runners really struggled to get close to their PBs.
Yeah, so if this was a golf course, it would be like a hard golf course.
Yeah, definitely a tough one.
Yeah.
And then I thought, cool, maybe that's, if it's your first time doing that course, it might be a lot tougher than you used to. But if it's your second time, what's it like for those runners? There were 9 runners who did bigs in 2021 who also did it in 2023. And 7 out of those 9 improved their result, and by an average of 12.4 loops.
Wow.
So I think there's a bit of experience there with course. I think the home ground advantage is certainly strong.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I think that that is definitely mainly home course advantage, and also just overall experience, because some of these runners in this race may not have even run a backyard ultra or many backyard ultras in 2021.
Yeah,
might be a mix of the two, but I think the home course advantage, or knowing the course or experience at the course, it obviously has a big advantage. Yeah.
So the average loops was 56.2. I don't think that's normal by any stretch of the imagination. That's a pretty bloody good winning loop count, isn't it? 56.
Yeah.
2021, the average was 39.7 on the same course. So it talks to the quality of the field this year. It's, by far the best group of backyard ultra runners ever assembled.
Yeah.
So average kilometers, 377.2, pretty impressive. Runners who achieved more than 100, there were 6. So prior to this run, only 4 people in the world had ever done that.
Yeah.
And then we had 6 in this one event. So 8% of the field did more than 100 plus. There were 9 others who did 90 plus. 23 hit the 3 days, the 72 hours, but pulled out before the 90. 63% of the field, so 47 runners, did between 48 and 72. So pulled out on that third day. And 72 runners made it past the 24-hour mark.
Yeah.
So with 3 pulling out in the first 24 hours.
96% of the field did 24 hours.
Yeah.
How good is that?
So,
it's worth mentioning as well, with those 6 runners who did over 100, 4 of them did it for the first time as well.
Yeah.
So you had Marin and Phil there who'd done it before, but the other 4 were first timers.
Yeah, so we doubled the amount of runners who have done 100.
Yeah.
So now there's 8.
Wow. Yep. Awesome.
And then finish reason. Now, the finish reason is a pretty weird stat, right? Yeah. So there's the runners out there experience a lifetime within a few days, and the reason for DNFing is complex and multi-layered. But there's 3 different reasons given on the stats. There's RTC, so refused to continue, did not complete, and over being finish the loop, but over the time limit. I think everyone who runs a backyard ultra, their dream is to be one of those overs. No one wants to refuse to continue. Can't quit in your chair. No one wants to turn back halfway through a loop, did not complete. Everyone wants to run until they time out.
Yeah.
I don't think many people achieve that in a normal backyard ultra. 33 runners timed out over the hour for a loop, which is 44% of the field. Yeah.
Watching it, that was something that really stood out to me as well, the amount of runners who were going over. And I thought that was really good, yeah.
Yeah, it's massive. I think, you're probably looking at maybe 5% of people who have ever done a backyard ultra have timed out. It's not many.
Yeah. Most of them just they decide before they do the loop they're not going to continue, so they start, walk 5 meters, and then turn back.
Yeah. Sounds like me. The most unique reason for finishing was the winner. Harvey finished because he won.
Yeah.
It's only one person. Now, I thought about milestones. So when you look at a backyard ultra, there's certain milestones where people drop out fairly quickly. Your 15-hour, your 24-hour, 30-hour, stuff like that. The most people dropping out in a single hour was 3, and that actually happened 5 times. After loop 29, after loop 38, 51, 58, and 61. What do you think is common about those numbers?
First day loop, or just completed last night loop?
No. Okay. There's absolutely no correlation in those numbers.
Okay.
They're just random numbers. Okay. Which I looked.
Yeah.
Why did 3 people pull out there? And I thought there has to be something that, they're hitting a milestone, or it's the first day loop, or it's the last night loop, or there's nothing. So the runners literally ran until they couldn't run anymore. The change from day to night didn't impact them as a group.
Right.
And then I thought, okay, what about just beating your PB by 1 and that might be the milestone. But only 3 runners beat their PB by 1, and then had to DNF.
Out of the 75.
Out of 75, yeah. So only 3 hit their PB, did one more, and then pulled out.
Wow.
So I think those numbers really, they talk to the strength of the field, the toughness of the course, and then just the sheer mental strength. Nighttime wasn't stopping the runners, daytime wasn't stopping the runners. Sure, the course was harder in the day, but they weren't thinking about time. They're not thinking about milestones or PBs or anything like that. They literally ran until they couldn't run anymore.
Yeah.
I also, I don't know if you're a cricket fan, Pato, but in cricket, there's heaps of cool stats like run rate and bowling averages and stuff like that. So I tried to, out of the numbers, pull out my own stats, and there's some that we can go through now to try and work out what is the run rate, what is that bowling average, what's the number you can look at a runner to know how good they are at running a backyard.
Yeah, sounds good. Is this on the runner stats tab?
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect.
So cool thing is we can sort them and bring some of the runners to the top here. First stat versus their PB. So who exceeded their PB by the most? I'll butcher some names, so I apologize in advance. But Ihor Veries.
Yep.
Ihor Veries beat his PB by 40. So his previous PB was 67 and did 107.
Wow.
It's massive.
Yeah. He was impressive, wasn't he?
Oh,
only 29 years old as well.
Yeah. He was amazingly impressive to watch. And when you look at his times, he was actually getting faster. On average, he deliberately started slow by looks, and then each day was slightly faster than the last. So he was almost negative splitting a 5-day event.
Yeah.
Bartos beat his PB by 39. So previous PB was 64, did 103. Yep. Frank the Tank, awesome to watch Frank the Tank. I think he's the sort of guy you'd love to go on a run with.
Yeah, he's a character, isn't he?
Yeah. Even when he didn't complete a loop, it was funny just watching him and the cameraman cut across the course to go back to the starting corral. He did 97. Previous PB was 67. John Knoll did 98. Previous PB was 74, so increased his PB by a whole day.
Yep.
Christoph, he was pretty cool to watch.
Yeah, I really enjoyed watching. There was a period of time when the camera was focusing on him a lot because he was providing so much drama, really struggling with his mental state. And he went so much, like he just kept on going. When that day came, I think that gave him wings or helped snap him out of whatever he was going through, because he started looking better. But he had like you were saying, an incredible performance.
He beat his PB by 22 hours. So previous was 55 and he made it to 77. Yeah. I think around the 60-hour mark, I remember watching him and the camera was focusing on him because he was certainly providing some drama. But he said to his crew, how are we going to keep going? Are they going to give us little bikes?
Yeah.
And he was legit. He was serious about it.
Yeah.
And I thought he's got to be out. But he kept going for another 20-odd hours.
I remember his crew responded like, what? What are you talking about? No, snap out of it. Snap out of it.
Yeah. Now, if we sort this the other way around, it's a bit sadder. But who didn't beat their PB?
Yeah.
So Fabrice from France, his previous PB was 60 and he was out at 10. I don't really remember seeing him pull out.
Yeah, I don't either. But and I don't know why. I don't know what happened.
Yeah,
I'm guessing that I'm only guessing he must have fallen in the trail. That's all I can.
yeah,
That's all I can.
yeah. Obviously, something happened there, so hope he's all right.
Yeah,
Ryan Crawford, we know what happened there. So blood in his urine, and just couldn't stop it. Just came back.
yeah.
Missed his PB by 45 hours, but again pulled out for the right reasons, and hope he's okay.
And I will mention that I loved how he stuck around and crewed James Blanton.
Yeah,
for the whole 72 hours that James stayed in there. I thought that was great to watch. I saw he was applying sunscreen to James's head. He was getting right. I heard him providing encouragement to all the other Australian runners too. So he's a team man. He is a team man.
Yeah, and he's done a lot of backyards, right?
Yeah. Probably.
And
must be about 9 or 10, I reckon.
Yeah, PB of 75, done 9 or 10 backyards himself, qualified for this event, the World Championships, and then you got him crewing for you. That it's not a bad crewmate to have.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Now, simple stat to look at is who did the fastest loop. Do you know who did the fastest loop? I just sorted it, so you probably do now.
No, it's not. I can't see it in your real-time changes, so I can't. But I will guess Fulati or Futali. Yeah,
was Visa Kavenen from Finland.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Ran a 30-minute 48-second loop.
Right.
Loop 11 was the last loop on the day course on the first day. So he did that time on the day course, which is amazing.
Yeah. Now, I read a post by Laz as well saying that the course record was broken. So that must have been it.
Yeah.
And that includes night loops too.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a cracker pace. That is very good. I while the race was going on, I went and ran my guts out to try and do my own 1 yard and see if I could beat them all.
Yeah.
And I reckon he still beat me.
Yeah. Was it on that loop you did that?
Nah, it would have been good if it was.
Yeah.
But I gave him an extra couple days.
Right. Yeah.
So I had fresh legs and they didn't.
Yeah.
Another interesting one. Well, obviously Bartos was really fast. Bartos did a 32:42, so third fastest.
Yeah.
Sam Harvey seems to be his style. He finished first on the first loop, did a 36:05, which I think he's done before, gone out fast on the first loop.
Yeah, at Dead Cow Gully, he did his first loop in 28 minutes.
28.
Yeah. This Dead Cow Gully is definitely not as hard as Biggs.
Yeah.
But it's still
28 is super fast.
It's an amazing pace for your first loop when you're going to say you break 100 to go out and do that. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, people certainly would have been questioning him, but they weren't at the end, were they? Who do you think had the fastest lap? So their fastest lap was the slowest out of the runners.
My guess would be Claire.
Yeah, Claire.
Yeah.
The only runner to not break 50 minutes.
Wow.
So her fastest lap was 52:08, and she was amazing to watch. She lived a lifetime of rest. She was going to work, doing a loop, coming back with 5 or 6 minutes maybe, having something to eat, lying down, getting the blanket, having some rest, waking up, hydrating, getting to the start line, all in that 5-6 minute break.
And that I learned something from watching those runners doing those slower laps. In the past, when I've done a slower lap, I'll just stay in the start. I'll run into the starting crew. I'll basically just stay there, wait for the next one to start, then go out. But now I know from now on, even if I get back with 90 seconds, still go into my chair, sit down for even 30 seconds and just just take some weight off my feet and to do something like that. And don't just mill around in the starting corral. That's something I'm doing for sure.
Yeah. It's a mental state as well to just have that confidence. I think even watching them, Lazard blow 3 whistles, and I would have got up straight away and walked to the corral and stood there for a couple of minutes. They weren't even getting up when he blew the last whistle for 1 minute. Yeah. Some of them were getting up when he said 15 seconds.
Yeah. Like some of them, like when we talked last time, some of them would be running into to make it back in time. And yeah, look, that's something I'm going to change next race, because I used to think, I'll look so strong if I get into the stage with like 30 seconds till the bell. But I don't really think anyone pays any attention to that. So I'm just going to stay in my chair, get in there with maybe 30 seconds till the start. I think that's plenty of time.
Yeah.
I'm not going to cut it too fine.
There's no stats for this. I wish there was a timing grid to see who got into the corral first.
Yeah.
But I reckon Phil would have been one of the first.
Yeah.
In a lot of the loops.
That is his style. So, and like I definitely noticed him there a lot, especially in the first half of the race. I think I saw him there first a lot. Of the time.
And he's focused in there as well. I don't think it's for everyone else. I don't think he's showing strength or anything like that. I think he just wants to have that minute and a half, 2 minutes to prepare mentally for the next loop.
Yeah. It's just part of his routine, I think.
Yeah. And who do you reckon had the latest entrance into the starting career?
Oh, I saw the video of Sam Harvey jumping into it with basically right on time.
Yeah, that would have gone to the third umpire, I reckon.
Yeah.
I reckon if there was Hawkeye technology to replay that in slow motion, it would have been a foot on the line, right? He would have been barely in.
I did see, I think it was the Mexican runner. He had a pretty close call. He made it in with about 4 seconds to go, then quickly turned around and made it back. It was probably just as close as Sam, but the footage of Sam was pretty cool.
Well, that might take us to slower slope.
Yeah.
So who do you think did the slower slope?
I would guess the Mexican dude.
Rodolfo Ramirez did the second slower slope with a 59.56.
Right.
4 seconds.
Yeah.
Thorleifson, again, I apologize, from Iceland, did a 59.57.
Oh, wow. Did he continue after that loop?
That's a very interesting question to ask. And I did ask that of the numbers.
Right.
So there were 5 runners who did a loop and got in after 59.50. So 5 runners had 10 seconds or less to turn around. None of those completed the next loop. So they may have started it, but none of them turned around a 10-second rest to complete the next loop. But Roman Pakbier from Netherlands, he did a 59.49 and continued and completed the next loop. So he had an 11-second turnaround, and it wasn't his last loop, which I think is amazing.
Yeah. Again,
I would have panicked and thrown in the towel mentally.
And what loop number was that he did the 59.49?
Let me have a look.
I'm just wondering how many more loops did he do after that slow loop?
Yeah. See, these are the cool things you get out of numbers, Pato.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that was so that was the last day loop on day 2. And then he ran 8 more night loops after.
Wow.
So his next loop was a 48.46 on the night loop. So he certainly put his foot down for the next one to make sure he got some rest.
Yeah.
And pulled in some pretty good night loops after. But from 11-second turnaround, continued on for 8 more. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I think it's interesting that Claire isn't really on this list. So Claire, being a slow runner coming in with not much time,
yeah,
for her slowest loop, she was actually 32nd. out of the whole group. So she didn't cut it close. Her slowest was 57.50.
Yeah.
So she still had 2 minutes and 10 seconds. She was just really consistent around that 55-minute mark.
Yeah.
Who do you think had the least slowest loop? So their slowest loop was still pretty fast.
Sam Harvey will be my guess.
Yeah, he's a good guess. He was 67th. So what does that make him? Ninth fastest, slowest loop. Is that a good way to put it? That's bloody confusing, isn't it? He did a 55.04. Bartos was his slowest loop was a 54.12. And the Brazilian Rennie, his slowest loop was a 48.27.
Yeah. The impressive thing about Bartos and Sam Harvey, though, is that they ran for so long, and still their slowest loops were some of the fastest, slowest loops.
Yeah. See, it is confusing to talk about it. Fastest, slow. Yeah. It's amazing. And that blew me away. I had to check the numbers. Rennie was the only person who didn't throw in a loop over 50 minutes. Everyone else had loops over 50 minutes.
And I'm surprised that Rennie, he did have such a fast, slowest loop, because he was having severe stomach issues.
Yeah.
Remember how they were filmed? That he was getting a lot of coverage during some of the race, and if he slowed it down a bit, like, he may have overcome that issue, maybe.
Yeah. Keith Russell was also pretty fast. His slowest was 51.21. That was his last loop.
Right.
But yeah, I think it's pretty amazing to see some of these slow times and actually how fast some of them are.
51.21.
Yeah, 51.21, his slowest.
That is.
And he ran 74 loops.
Yeah, wow, that's amazing. And that was his last loop. 51.
Last loop, yeah.
Jeez.
Then I think it's cool to look at day and night. So there's a few different sort of strategies that pop out in the numbers. So some people were running particularly slow daytimes and getting in some fast night loops. So Phil Gore's a notable example there. Other people were really consistent and just running a consistent time, whether it was day or night. Claire is one of the most obvious people running that sort of strategy. The average day loop, Rennie from Brazil had the fastest average day. He was 43.43.
Yep.
Van der Boy from Vietnam, 45.06.
Yep.
Amanda Nelson, she was fast. Watching her run.
She was. What was her slowest lap?
Her slowest.
I don't think she went above 4. I don't think she even made it into the 50s, did she?
No, she did a 55.28. That was her last loop.
Right. Yeah.
And she is one of the runners who beat her PB by 1.
Right.
And then finished. So when you see her ring that bell, and then she couldn't stand up. She couldn't walk.
Yeah. They tried to get her up again, but she had to get back down.
Yeah, it's like the mind couldn't send a signal to the legs. The legs just weren't connected.
Yeah.
She was fast. 46.17. Keith Russell, average day 46.23. Out of the Dirty Dozen, so the final 12, Bartos had the fastest day loop average at 48.44. Sam Harvey was also fast at 50.11, and Phil Gore 50.25.
And is this on an average of all their days combined, or
all their days combined? Yeah. So I mean, the first couple here, Van der Boy and Rennie, their loops still enough to kick my butt in a backyard ultra. But compared to the field here, doing 23, 24 loops, it's a bit different when you're running 3-4 days.
Yeah.
Sam Harvey, Phil Gore, and Bartos, their average over all the days they ran was particularly fast.
Yeah.
Obvious one, you'll get this, I reckon. Who do you think was the slowest average day loop?
Oriole.
Out of the Dirty Dozen, Oriole was. 55.06. So he was scraping through.
It would have to be, but the other one would have to be Claire, wouldn't it?
Yeah. So Claire was the slowest at 55.31.
Yeah.
Willie David Christopher from Malaysia. It was great seeing him finish as well.
Yeah.
55.13 was his average day. So Frank the Tank was actually pretty slow as well. 54.33 average
during the
daytime lap. Yeah.
He was really his average would have been getting slower as the race went on, because he definitely kept scraping through and through and through towards the end. Like he was a soldier, wasn't he? He was an absolute soldier.
What about nighttime? Who do you think was fastest in the night?
Would have to be Phil, I reckon.
Cool. Out of the Dirty Dozen, so the final 12, Phil was the fastest nighttime runner, 42.38.
Yeah.
His first 3 nights were clockwork. So I know I did a graph showing the variance between his night loops, and there was barely any variance at all. It was so tightly grouped, those night loops. But then his 4th night did blow out a bit, which would have impacted his average. So he's 5th fastest average night loop overall, but out of the Dirty Dozen, he's the fastest night loop runner. Sam Harvey was close behind him at 43 minutes.
Yeah.
But overall, Rip Vaz from Latvia, his average night was 40.36, which is bloody fast. And Keith Russell, who was just consistently faster the whole race, 41.38. Renee, the Brazilian, and again, Amanda Nelson showing how fast she is. Her average night was 41.44. So faster than both Phil Gore and Sam Harvey on her average night loop.
Wow. Yeah, she's an amazing one. I saw that her 24-hour track, or like her 12-hour track record is 130 something. So she's definitely a fast runner.
Yeah,
I don't think she can run slower.
Yeah, she probably was running slower. Well, I think that they're all trying to run slow, right? But she's probably felt like a snail's pace to her.
Yeah.
So I think an interesting number to look at is what was their night versus day. So some people were running a consistent pace across both, and some people were running a faster night and a slower day. So I worked out the variance between the two. Who do you reckon out of the Dirty Dozen had the biggest variance between night and day? Slow day, fast night.
Oh, Phil. I'll say Phil.
Yeah, without a doubt. So Phil was 3rd overall, including his 4th night, which blew out that nighttime average. He was on average 7 minutes 46 faster at nighttime than he was during the day.
What hour did that 4th night start?
So you're asking me to do maths.
Oh, was it 60? I think it was 60. For the day.
4th night?
Yeah.
4th night.
Oh, actually, fifth night. 84.
Yeah. Need a calculator, Paddy.
Oh, it's all right. I can see. It's all right.
24 times 4. Well, the 5th night was it finished on 107. So Harvey did one loop after that. But if you talk about the 4th night, that's lap 83.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Because you probably saw Phil's post today. He posted that it was around the 74-hour mark. He felt pain in his left leg.
Yeah. Yep.
So I'm not sure if you were going to bring this up later, but did you see in the stats?
You can. Yeah. So you certainly see where his leg starts hurting. It is during the day. Right. You see those daytime loops start to pick up. Around that 70-odd hour mark. I can bring it up. Look at Phil's total graph, and what you'll see is he was on a pattern of going faster at night. And the first couple loops at night, the first one would be around that 43, 44 mark at most. He did turn it up for the first couple loops of night. Felt like he was trying to get back to his normal routine. But then he started running some of those nighttime loops just as slow as he'd run the day.
Right, yeah.
So you can see during the day, his day loops on that fourth day really started to blow out. That's where he did his first loop over 55.
Right.
And then he tried to get it back into his normal nighttime routine, but it looked like he had to adapt his plan there because of the leg.
Yeah. So I like how you've highlighted the laps that are over 55 minutes and under 45 minutes.
Yeah, I made those numbers up. I don't know what a good number to look at is, but I think over 55 minutes, I'd panic. So I figured that's a good line to draw in the sand. We could probably get this one right as a guess. Who did the most loops over 55? Most percentage of their loops over 55?
I'll say Claire,
yeah. So 58% of her loops were over 55 minutes.
Yeah.
And I think the other 42% were pretty close to 55 minutes, right? Just really consistent.
Yeah.
Of the Dirty Dozen, Frank the Tank ran 46% of his loops over 55 minutes. Oriel, 44% of his loops. Right. John Knoll, 39% of his loops. And John Knoll looked like a machine out there, he was just not human watching him run.
Yeah, he was very impressive.
And Harvey, not on the first couple of days. A lot of his slower loops came later on. I think he found a groove and he went into Claire mode. I think we can call that Claire mode. He did 30% of his loops over 55 minutes.
Yeah, I can see a lot of red there, over 55, yeah.
Now we can reverse this. Do you reckon any runners didn't hit that 55-minute? We know a couple already.
Yeah, so Amanda Nelson's one, right?
Yeah, she did one.
Are we talking all runners or just the Dirty Dozen?
Well, we can talk both. So Amanda Nelson did one loop over 55, and that was her last loop. But if we look at
Sam Harvey wouldn't have done many.
He did one.
Wow.
One, and it wasn't his last. Bartos did none. Bartos from Poland did no loops over 55.
Wow.
Last loop was 54. No, his slowest was 54:12.
Gee.
And that wasn't his last.
Yeah, he looked like a machine, like just so consistent. Yeah. It's the way he was moving as well. He looked the same at the start of the race and he did towards the end.
Yeah.
He might have even been better towards the end than he did at the start.
Yeah. I look better than I did. I'd only been sitting on the couch watching it. So I haven't got some sleep and I look worse than he did. And then Ion Veries from Canada did one loop, and Sam Harvey, one loop over 55.
Yeah. That's very impressive by Veries because, as we know, he was the assist with 100.
Yeah, it's amazing. And we can look at the graph. It's hard on a podcast for everyone else to see the graph, but we'll look at it in a minute and you'll see just how his lap times seemed to improve. Like they got better and better.
Mm.
Sub 45. Who's our speed demon? Who did the most loops under 45?
I would guess
This.
maybe Sam Harvey.
Yep. So of the Dirty Dozen, Sam Harvey did 41% of his loops under 45 minutes, so 37 of his 91.
Yeah.
Phil Gore, 38 of his 100. A lot of those over the first 3 days.
Yeah.
Do you reckon anyone didn't do a sub 45 minute? Claire, yeah. Claire did none. There was actually a fair few runners who didn't do any. It was heaps. Yeah. So if we count them up.
I see that even Oriole did one. Oriole, who was running most of the laps over 55 or thereabouts, he even did one at 44 minutes and 45 seconds. So for some reason, he turned it on lap 69. He went busy. When
you look at his the graph of all his times, he's got this magic little blip where for some reason it probably means something to him. He's had a shower, or he needed to have a good rest, or he needed the sleep or food, or all of the above.
Yeah.
They really turned it on. But there's 22 runners who didn't do any sub 45 minute loops, which I think in backyard ultras, just a general backyard ultra runner, most of them would do a sub 45 minute loop. Most would aim for it.
Yeah. So do you reckon most runners would do a under 45?
I reckon most would at least get close to that 45-minute target to try and get that 15-minute rest. Where I think this goes to prove you don't need that rest. You don't need 15 minutes. 15 minutes is just going to seize you up potentially.
Yeah. And that's what we discussed on the other night as well. Like we were talking about why are so many runners looking so stiff so soon in the race, like on that first night. And that was my theory, that they were running their laps not too fast, but faster than what they were used to. That's, wasn't it? Yeah. Because when you look at this this chart, there's so much green on that first night.
Yep.
Which means under 45 seconds. So it's all over. It's covered in green. So
yeah, I think there's a lot of runners. Looks like they tried to bank some sleep on that first night.
Yeah.
There's certain runners that stand out where they didn't, and they tried to bank sleep on the third night and fourth night. And I think Sam Harvey's numbers look particularly like the first couple nights he was trying to take it easy, but still get some rest, and then tried to get that rest on the third night. But yeah, vast majority of runners were trying to bank some sleep on that first night. Looking at the numbers.
It's interesting you say that, because we mentioned Christophe from France earlier, how he was mentally out of it. If you look at his times, he didn't do any sub 45-minute laps on that first night or that second night. So he probably wasn't getting much sleep, which might explain why he was so happy.
Yeah, and his day loops got consistently slower as well, so he wasn't really getting much rest during the day. And then that third night, he had some particularly slow loops, 58 minute loop there. So yeah, I mean, I was sleep deprived. I wasn't asking where the little bicycles were, but I reckon I would have if I had the amount of sleep he did.
Yeah.
Who do you reckon had the fastest last loop?
Either Keith Russell or Sam Harvey.
Yeah, it's a funny one, because you feel like the last loop shouldn't be your fastest. Out of the Dirty Dozen, Harvey Lewis had the fastest last loop.
Wow.
So he knew he was finished. He didn't have to get back for rest.
Yeah.
His last loop, he won. So that was a 47.31.
Yeah, he didn't want to time out on that last loop.
Yeah, yep. Yeah. Oh, that'd be terrible, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Yep. Lose track of time, yeah. Sam Harvey, 49.03. which he was actually, he looked really strong. He looked really strong when he pulled out. He ran a 49.03, had a good 11 minutes there. And yeah, didn't complete the next loop. So,
well, from 84 to 91, his lap times were 43, 41, 42, 43, 47, 43, 42, and 49. So
yeah.
I don't know if you saw when he was going out on that 92nd loop, the one he turned around, he was like a cat on a hot tin roof.
Yep.
He was like jumping at shadows. I didn't think he was going to turn around. I just thought, geez, it looks like he's hallucinating bad. But yeah, and then next thing I know, he's hugging his mum and talking to Laz.
What did you think of the interview when Sam finished?
He sounded like a poet.
Yeah.
It sounded like he was reciting poetry.
There's only two circumstances where I've ever spoken like that. Yeah. One, I'm either really drunk.
Yeah.
I've had some epiphany hit me, all of a sudden understand life.
Yeah.
Or I've had a really, really clear mind and I've been completely there and thinking about, life and pondering on life for a while and come to some realization. So I don't know if Sam was completely delusional and doesn't remember what he said, or he was completely with it and, just really understood everything around him, or maybe it's a combination of both.
Well, to me, the guy's he's a different kind of dude. Like, he's a really, I told him this when he was on my podcast. Like, I was really blown away by how much of a deep thinker he is. He's a really deep thinking, like, guy. So yeah, look, I mean, I think what he said was really interesting. Like, it sounded like he was just sick of backyard, like he was backyard opposite out. But yeah,
there's a muscle in your brain that switches on and gets you to keep going. And at the end of a long run, whether it's a point to point or a backyard, end of a long run, you can feel that muscle relax. And I've had that moment myself where you're driven, you have to keep moving forward, just keep moving forward, just keep going. And then when that muscle relaxes because you're done, your body shuts down, your brain shuts down, emotionally, everything just drains out of you. Yeah. It's like he had that on a bigger scale, not just one run, but a group of runs in a couple of years of his life. And he'd been driven so much. And then on that loop, he just let it relax.
Yeah. I wonder how he's feeling. I haven't seen anything on his social media or anything like that. Hopefully he's all right, because going into the race, it felt like it was the most important thing in his life, like, ever.
Yeah.
Very important to him, which it was for a lot of runners, but this was another level.
Yeah, well, he'd spoken about 150, and believe the man when he says something, I think, with Sam Harvey. Yeah. But yeah, hopefully he's doing really well, and hopefully he's over the moon with the awesome effort he put in, because it is bloody impressive, isn't it?
Yeah. But I mean, I thought that if he dropped, it would have been because of this physical issue, but it appears to be like it was mental issue. Like, I mean, his times, he wasn't running slower. It was just it was dropped because he just didn't want to go anymore. That muscle relaxed.
So I looked at rest over the last 12 hours, which ties in nicely here. So how much rest you got over the last 12 loops can shed some light on how you were when you finished, potentially. Did you have time for sleep? Did you not have time for sleep and rest? And out of the dirty dozen, who do you think had the most rest time over their last 12 loops?
Definitely Sam Harvey.
Yeah, Sam Harvey. So he averaged 12 minutes and 43 rest per loop over his last 12, total of 2 hours and 32 minutes and 30 seconds.
Yeah.
For context, Your Veris, 9 minutes 22, 1 hour 52 total. So Sam had 40 minutes extra over the last 12 loops than Your Veris, who was the second most rested over the last 12 loops of the Dirty Dozen. And then Phil Harvey, which surprises me because it does feel like Phil was doing it tough for a while there. He actually had 9 minutes and 13 seconds average rest for the last 12 loops.
What, Phil Gore, you mean?
Phil, sorry. What did I say? Phil Harvey.
Phil Harvey,
yeah. Imagine that.
Yeah.
Can't combine them. It'd be you get 200 laps. Yeah, so there is some nuance in the numbers. So whether the last 12 were during the day or during the night is going to throw those numbers out. But it's still, rest is rest, regardless of what you were running. Who do you reckon had the least amount of rest over the last 12 hours? Oriole. So I find this amazing, this one. He averaged 2.5 minutes downtime over the last 12 hours, a total of 29 minutes and 57 seconds.
Wow. 29 minutes.
And 57 seconds over 12 hours.
Geez. And what did you say Sam Harvey was?
So Sam was over 2.5. Sam was 2 hours and 32 minutes.
My God. That's amazing, isn't it? So he had 2 hours less rest in his last 12 hours than Sam Harvey.
It's just, so it's amazing to think you can just continue going with that little rest. So, he really he was grinding him out.
Yeah.
His last 6 loops were averaging 57.28.
Wow. Yeah, he's a very entertaining runner. Like the ones who cut it fine like that, they're really entertaining to watch, aren't they? Those ones who just do it loop after loop after loop.
Yeah. It's really cool towards the back to see them just robotically just get up and get to the grind and just keep going.
But it's funny when they get into their camp, they're pretty hectic some of the times. They don't have much time. Yeah. They're really slow out on the loop, but then they go into their camp and they're all hectic. Like I saw one of the rest times he had, like he didn't have much time at all, and his crew like started pouring water down his back. He's like, "Don't do that!" And then he wanted a bottle of water, and they threw it to him. Like, he had to pick it up just as the bell was ringing. Did you see that?
Yeah, there's some pretty interesting moments even between the finish line and back to their tents. By the time they sat down in their chair, they had something to eat in their mouth, something to drink in their hand, and a blanket around them. And that's just the 10 seconds it took them to walk to their chair and sit down. So there wasn't a second wasted. And I think that's another thing to think about when you're running a backyard ultra. All those seconds are so precious.
Yeah.
So, you think you need 10, 12 minutes of rest time to get in everything you need. Maybe you don't. You just need to use the time you have really, really well.
That's one of the things I'm going to do for my next backyard ultra is have a camelback ready, fully stocked.
Yep.
So if I am late in to at the end of a loop and I don't have time to find my vibe, I'll just take that camelback.
Yeah.
Into corral, have everything I need in it, so I can just eat or drink whatever out on that loop. Yeah.
Having one packed as like an emergency pack, like
a last resort thing.
Yeah. So you don't have to feel like it's an emergency because you're fine. You got that packed and ready to go.
Yeah.
I was getting to the end of a loop and sitting down and thinking, I haven't got much time. But then I'm looking through the esky. What flavor Gatorade do I feel like? And What do I want to eat? Do I want a music bar? Do I want some rice? Or there's no point wasting that time looking through a menu or thinking.
Yeah.
Phil talks about taking the think out of what he's doing and having that plan of what he eats and when to put on sunscreen and stuff like that. That must save him a lot of seconds and give him more time to actually rest rather than planning out his food and drink.
Yeah, because he can just go into his camp, sit down, and his crew know what to do. They'll just put in his hand what he needs, and just to sit there and suck on the straw.
Wasn't Gemma amazing?
Yeah.
He
was awesome, especially when like he was hurting towards the end after he fell. He was bleeding and everything, but she still wouldn't let him stop. She made him go back out. But she was awesome the whole way through, and updating the social media as well.
I saw that. How did she find time? I don't understand. And it wasn't a quick post on there either. She's tagging the sponsors. She's putting a thoughtful post with a caption on there. Phenomenal. And goes to show if you're crewing someone in a backyard ultra, think about every second as well. She had there's one loop where Phil finished. The camera was on Phil and asking him some questions, and he was already eating. By the time the camera turned to him, he's already eating. Gemma's there sorting him out. And Phil, halfway through the sentence, said, "And now I can get some sleep," and just walked off. Crews were amazing. I think all the crews were really cool to watch, and the runners that DNF'd and then helped each other out was really cool. And the crews whose runners had DNF'd and then helped out other runners was really, really cool to watch.
Yeah. And we mentioned Hendrick before, who got disqualified at 60. How were his stats looking up until that point?
Really, really strong, to be honest. So one thing I liked looking at was what I called the spread. So how different were their times for each loop, looking at each loop on each day. So the first loop of the day course, the second loop of the day course, the seventh loop of the night course, etc. What were the time variances? During the night, some of his variances were under 20 seconds, 18 seconds, 10 seconds. So on the 17th loop, there was only 18 seconds different. I know he only did the night twice. He didn't get to do it third time, but his daytime loops are really, really close as well. So he certainly showed no signs of slowing down. I'd looked at his graphs and thought, geez, he's onto a good one here, because he was running really consistently, really well to a plan. And it was just, a couple of hours before he got disqualified, which was just heartbreaking to watch.
That last night, he ran between 36 and 48 hours. All of his laps were under 45 minutes, except for two of them.
So he was definitely one that was running a strategy with slower daytime loops and faster nighttime loops. So he must have had some pretty good rest. There weren't many laps at night that he had over 45 minutes. I think there's one or two over both nights. Outside of that, he would have been banking a lot of rest, getting ready for that day 3, day 4, day 5. I'll throw my opinion, because I think it's been a hot topic. I don't reckon he would have been disqualified if he kept going without the timing chip.
Yeah, I think you're right. I don't see how you can disqualify someone just for not having a timing chip. As long as he completes the loop, they would just give him a time of 59 minutes and 59 seconds. And then they'd say, remember to put it on for this next one, and that's it.
But obviously going back, he did that for 100% the right reasons.
Yeah.
He felt, I've done something wrong. I'm not going to take a shortcut and keep going without it. I'm going to penalize myself and pay the price myself by running all the way back, getting it, and then doing the loop anyway. So he added 8 minutes before he could, start the loop again. He was 8 minutes behind and then had to run pretty fast to get through. So he certainly tried to make up for missing the timing chip. But yeah, he was looking really, really strong. So heartbreaking for him, but I think,
But to me, it's kind of like running a loop without it in a race it's like running a loop without your race bib. Like sometimes late in a race, you'll see some runners without their race bib because everyone knows who you are by that point.
Yep.
You're not going to get disqualified for that. I think it's a similar thing with the timing chip. I'll just say, remember to put it on next time.
Yeah.
Poor dude.
Yeah. Well,
he'll be back.
In Australia, most of the runners don't have a timing chip, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't think it's inherent to the backyard format. I don't think it's something that has to be there. But I do think going back to the starting corral is something that is, part of the core of backyard is you start that loop, you have to start it, and then you're unsupported. So
yeah, like Laz says, you can't go back.
Yeah.
You can't go back.
Yeah. So yeah, he was looking really, really strong. Do you want to run through quickly, say the top 10 runners and what their days and nights look like?
Yeah, sounds good.
Cool. So Oriel, I've got his graph here. So if you look at Oriel, his first day loops were all around that 51 to 53.5 minute mark. So he wasn't overly slow, he wasn't overly fast, but fairly consistent on that day. And then he turned up his night loops. He actually had a couple fast loops on the first couple night loops, so 45 odds. Then got a bit slower during the middle of the night and chucked in a couple fast ones again, 46, 47 for the last couple. The second day was a bit slower, so he averaged around 55 minutes on that second day. But then second night, again, faster than day course, but he couldn't get under 50 minutes. Well, maybe he could have, but he didn't. So he didn't do any loops under 50 minutes for that second night. And then just continued to get a little bit slower on that third day. He pulled a 57.5 minute loop there.
Oh, yeah. Almost 58, 57.
Yeah, 57.49. And then looking at the night loops, they continue on in the 50s, 55s. So in a night loop, he did a 58.22 on that third night. But then 3 laps later, there's this really crazy blip where he did a 44.45.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of footage on YouTube to go back to find that, but something happened there. He's had a foot bath and a roast dinner or something on that one loop, and that was his fastest on that third night.
So that tells me, even though he's running most of his laps slow, he's still under control. He's not.
Yeah.
He wouldn't have been feeling worried or anything like that. He's just kind of like running to like a plan, knowing he's going to come in late, but he's feeling all right. And
yeah, well, he's slowing down fairly consistently from the start. So yeah, he's faster at night, but each night is slower than the last, and each day is slower than the last, and that has a smell of sort of he's lost it. He's gone here. But clearly he was still running quite strategically. He had the energy and the mindset to go, okay, I need a fast one here to get something done, and he pulled it out and then went straight back into grinding out the 55, 56, 57-minute loops.
Yeah. I'll just say I love the day course when runners when you're waiting for the runners to come and they turn around that corner and come running up the driveway.
Yeah.
It's awesome when they're coming up and they're like, I'm not struggling to make time, but close to missing time, and like everyone's cheering them to come on and they're pushing.
Yeah.
I love it.
Again, the mindset, the 3 whistles are going off.
Yeah.
They know they're going to make it, and they know they'll get some food and they'll get some drink and they'll get whatever they need. You didn't really see people running along, hear the whistles, and then completely panic.
Yeah.
They already knew where they were on the course at that point.
Yeah. It's like when we watch it, like we know if they're just before the driveway, they can still make it, even if they have heard the first 3 whistles.
Yeah.
Like we know they're going to make it, and they do too.
Sam Harvey. So Sam has a few little Oriole blips where he's run a fast lap. His first lap was fast, and then lap 15 and 16 at night were fast. But he was definitely running a fast pace overall compared to some of the other runners. His day loops were slower than his nights, so he was getting in that rest on the nights. If you look at his second night, there was some slower laps on his second night. So I don't know if something was going on.
Like around the 47 mark?
Yeah.
There's even a 52 there.
He did a 52, a 49, a 47. So potentially strategic, potentially he had a little bit of a niggle. But then going into the third day, those third day loops really consistent. So he was definitely under control on that third day. 52s, almost all the way across, a couple of 53s, 54s. Then you get to the third night. His third night loops were bloody fast. So he's had his fastest night average on the third night.
Yeah, it looks like his best night was this night.
Yeah. And then went out for the day course. So the fourth day, they were, broadly speaking, slowing down. There's a couple of loops that he chucked in there that were faster, but overall the average during that day was certainly slowing down and almost hit that 55-minute mark, but didn't.
Yep.
And then he was still looking pretty good on that fourth night. So he's still hitting under 45 minutes on the night loops. He had a couple that were over, one of them being his last, but outside of that, there's 147. The rest are 41s, 42s, 43s. And then his last loop, 49, which, we spoke about. That's a pretty fast loop compared to some of the runners for their last.
Yeah.
So again, another runner that was looking really strong. And then, they're out.
Yeah.
Next, who we got? Oh, Frank the Tank. I think he's going to be one of the favourites that I watch from now on, because he was really, really, really exciting to watch.
Yeah,
Frank was on a different strategy, so he's not on the Phil Gore strategy at all of trying to really push out night loops to get that rest.
Yeah.
He started the first day. There were some faster loops, faster being 48s, 45, 46. But he was doing, up to 54 minutes on that first day. And then at the night, he had loops over, there's a 53 in there on that first night. There is a fast one. That's where he did his fastest loop on that first night.
Yeah, 38.06.
38, yeah, blistering pace. So again, that's a little Oriole blip where he's decided to chuck in a really fast one. But he was fairly consistently paced across day and night. His nights were only slightly faster than his days. And he was grinding out over 55-minute loops fairly consistently from the third day. So he did almost 48 hours of averaging over 55 and just chucking in a couple loops under where he needed to.
Yeah, sure. I can see on between 49 and 59, every loop was over 55 minutes except for one of them.
Yep.
And that was 54:43. So
Yeah. So, and from that point, yeah, there's some faster loops in the night. But then, there's still some 56s at nighttime.
yeah.
Which at nighttime was a particularly slow time for the runners.
Yeah.
So yeah, amazing to see how much he managed to grind out at that point. It's just a huge effort, and again, it was amazing to see him finish. I think he had the biggest grin, and he was making jokes.
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah.
yeah, it was amazing to see him just walk to the start corral. Then you got John Knoll. What do you think of John Knoll out there?
Yeah, I thought he was great. He flew under the radar a little bit for me.
Yep.
But yeah, like towards the end when he was like the last few, like yeah, he really stood out as being a really good runner.
Yeah. So he looking at strategy it seems like a bit of a split. So his first day loops were nice and slow. So he's definitely banking some energy there. In the 50s, 52, 53. And then the night he definitely had some fast loops. So, almost just under 39 for that first. No, sorry, just 43, 48 for that first night. But then he definitely slowed down. So from that fast night, slow day, it started to become all sort of one pace over the night and the day. There were some blips in there where he threw in a faster loop, mainly at the start of those night course loops. But he was grinding out quite a few laps over 55 minutes. All his third day, by looks, were over 55, but then turned it around on his fourth day a bit to throw in some 52s, 53s. And yeah, last loop there during the day, 55, just started to slow down just a touch, but it was still ahead of his day 3 time, which was a 55 on that first loop. So he still looked a bit faster than he had been on previous days, but obviously had been grinding out those laps for quite a while at that point.
I wonder if it's getting close to 100 had anything to do with it. Like he wanted to make 100s so bad. Well, as he got closer to 100, it made him speed up a little bit to give himself more rest, perhaps.
Yeah. Now, Phil Gore is my favourite graph to look at, Phil Gore. And it's amazing that he hit 100 again. He's one of the few runners in the world that's done 100, and he's one of the even fewer that's done 100 multiple times.
Yeah.
First 3 day and nights were clockwork, absolutely clockwork. I could, to the point where on the second day, I know he listens to the podcast, but I reckon you look on the second day, on the 4th loop of the second day. So what's that, 28?
Yep.
I reckon that's when he had his sponge bath or shower.
Oh, yeah, 40, because he did 42 minutes.
Yeah. Because every other loop time you look at is so close to previous loop times, and that one stands out like a little blip. It's had something to do in the rest time. But his nighttime loops, he had spoken about it on podcasts before. I don't know if he said it on your podcast about running 3 fast, 1 slower, 3 fast, 1 slower, 3 fast, and then 1 slower. And that's how he gets his 9 fast loops for sleeping at night.
Yeah.
So
you can see that here, can't you?
Yeah, and it was the same loop. So he didn't run that to feel. He ran the first 3 days to a schedule that definitely was working, because he got to 100, but he was also able to stay on that strategy for a long time.
Yeah.
And really interesting, his plan must be really detailed, because when you look at the nighttime loops, he throws in 3 fast ones and then a slower one, and then 3 fast ones that roughly the same pace as the first 3 fast ones. But his second slow loop is slower than the first slow loop. So he's got 3 different paces chucked in there for his night loops, and somehow over 3 days he can get his mind and his body and get around what pace he needs to do at each individual loop.
And is that a trend over the first 3 nights, is it?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Clear as day.
Wow.
So I think his slowest loop for that first slow lap, the slowest time he did it for that first slow lap. So if you look at the 16th loop and then the 40th loop, and then 48 plus 16 is whatever that is. Those loops were about 43, 44, 45. So the slowest was 44.57. So 44.57 was his slowest first slow loop of the night.
Yeah.
And then he'd do 3 more fast ones. And then the 20th loop, of the day, 48 minutes, 52, 50 minutes and 2 seconds, 46 and 54. So his fastest second slow lap was still slower than his slowest first slow lap. So, really, really well planned out and executed. But then on the 4th day, you see as he heads towards the back end of the day loops, he's got that 56.34 as the last day loop. Chucks in a 44.18, but then from there his night loops pick up. So he ends up doing a 56 in a night loop. So they're his first over 50-minute loops at night. And there are some faster ones in there, but it looks like he was working through that leg pain.
Yeah,
it had really hit him by that stage. And maybe he was trying a few different things. He was doing some faster loops to maybe get some rest, and he's doing some slower loops to maybe take the pressure off the leg.
Yeah.
And then, his last few loops during the day to get him to 100, 54, 57, 54, 55, and 58.45 was his last.
Those last 4 loops that he ran, that was some of the most exciting TV I've ever watched.
It was mind-blowing to watch him run those last few loops, and all the runners actually to watch them.
Yeah.
And it's during the day. It was at that point in the race, come around that 95, 96 loop mark. If you just tuned in, you'd think it was the weirdest and slowest race you've ever watched in your life. But if you understood what they'd gone through to get to that point, it was the gutsiest stuff I'd seen. And the moment that really stood out to me was they had the rocky gravel driveway, which none of them wanted to run because it looked horrid to run on. And they're all walking at that point to get to the end of it. And Phil was at the back of the pack. As soon as his feet hit that tarmac, he started running.
Yeah.
As soon as his feet hit that tarmac, he started running and started overtaking runners and, really putting in that effort. And they were all walking/running zombies at that point. It was amazing to watch.
And because he was wearing that his 102 T-shirt, it's kind of like the Australian green and gold. It felt like a real Australian sporting moment to me. Like he was running for Australia, and it was something special. And watching him going out, even though you knew he was hurting, especially after he'd fallen, and he still went out to try and do that 101st loop. That was that was just something special. I couldn't believe what I was watching. It was one of the best things I've ever seen.
Yeah. Well, he was definitely in the pain cave, and going into the race, you could say he had a target on his back. And at that point where he put the Phil Gore 102 shirt on, he literally had a target on his back. He had 102 written on there. And he was putting in the effort just like all the rest of them were. But amazing to watch. Also amazing, Marin from Belgium.
Yep.
Again, another.
He's a smooth mover, isn't he? He just looks like an actual runner.
Yeah. Yeah, I reckon there's something in the ponytail. Only people with a ponytail tend to have that sort of natural flowing running style. Maybe I'll grow mine out.
Yeah.
But he had slower days and faster nights. It wasn't as extreme as some of the other runners, but he definitely had Oriole blips where he threw in some faster loops. I don't know if it was a scheduled thing or not, because it's not every loop, but the first night and the third night, his last loop was particularly fast. So maybe he was planning something there to get ready for those nighttime loops. But yeah, he was throwing in getting ready for the daytime loop. So yeah, his last nighttime loop. On the first night, he threw in a 39.26, and on the third night, he threw in a 39.28. And that seemed to get him prepared for those daytime course change and the daytime loops.
Yeah. I noticed that a lot of the runners ran slower first loops, slower first day loops.
Yep.
Well, does that show up on your
yeah, when you look at it's almost like going for a normal 5K run, right? You have a slow first K to warm up, and then you have a pretty good middle, and then you're a little bit knackered at the end.
Yeah.
And that's what it looks like in some of these numbers for the runners. When they got out on that day course, they weren't necessarily looking to run their fastest loop on that first loop. Maybe they're feeling it out or remembering the course.
Yeah.
But yeah, then they get into a groove, be a bit faster, and then by the end of the day loops, that would take its toll. They're a bit slower. But same with the night loops. There are some runners who ran particularly fast first loops on the night, but I think a majority showed a slower first loop on the night course.
Right.
And then their faster loops were, sort of in the middle of that night. But yeah, Marin put fast loops in at the last night loop, which maybe, shoe change, clothing change or something. It's a good moment in time to, have that rest and start a new day.
Yeah, sure. Because all of the runners would have changed from their road shoes to their trail shoes after the last night loop too. So I guess that's some time they need extra.
Yeah. Well, Aaron definitely got it.
He might have a foot bath as well. Take off his shoes, have a foot bath.
Yeah.
And then put on his trail shoes.
Mori Terumichi Morishida.
Oh, yep.
How good was it to watch him again? Because obviously in 2021 he had that fall and couldn't continue, and that was a bit of a dramatic moment. It was, like a Hendrick moment of the 2021 race.
Yeah.
How good was it to see him continue on in this event?
Yeah. And it almost makes you think, gee, what could have happened if he didn't fall 2 years ago? Him and Harvey might have pushed all the way to 100.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe. Well, yeah, he clearly has a capacity for it because he did it. Yeah. 101 yards and previous best 80. So the 80 was in 2021, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, yeah, it was close to that. I think he did. Well, yeah, it would have been because I think he did 86 for Team Japan at Sat Champs, off the top of my head.
Yeah,
it would have been. Yeah.
Yeah, really, really good to see his style. He had a faster night than day. There's some really minor Oriole blips where he's chucked in a faster one. It tends to be 3 or 4 loops into his nighttime. So he'd start his nighttime loops a little bit slower, then chuck in a fast one, maybe to get some food or something in there. He did get slower as the time progressed. So, his third night was his slowest night, but then he started picking up. His fourth night was faster than his third night. So he definitely picked up the pace there, got through that fourth night. But then you can see the fifth day. So after the last night loop he ran a 53.25 day loop, a 55.57, a 55.33, a 55.36, and then a 58.40. So he was really cutting it fine and grinding it once he hit that day loop again for the fifth time.
Yeah, I noticed that the 3 Japanese runners, or 3 of the Japanese runners, were finishing a lot of their loops together. So it looked like they were running as a team. Especially during the night loops.
Yeah. I think you go to lots of people say on your podcast, but that their favorite thing is the people they meet and the conversations you have in a backyard ultra. I think there were definitely a whole heap of those moments with these guys, because it seemed like there were lots of different runners running together, and there's a moment on the highlights I watched today where Harvey Lewis says, the bus is back, and there's 5 or 6 runners together running as a group. Bartos, similar, so a slightly faster night loop than his day loop. It wasn't really marked. You can definitely tell he ran a slow first day. He was really particular to run that slow first day, but there are a couple fast loops in there.
Yeah.
And then that first night was his fastest first night. And again, you can see his first loop on the night wasn't his fastest. His second loop there for the first night was his fastest loop. He still had a difference between his day loops and night loops as the event progressed, but it slowed down as it went on. Still a fast runner though, because there's nothing here over 55. We talk about slowing down, but it's slowing down from a fairly fast pace, right? Yeah. So not a single loop over 55. He's sort of on day 3 leveled out. So there's some ups and downs, but the averages of his lap times sort of plateaued, and they seem to plateau at night time, somewhere around that 49-minute mark. There's some over, there's some under, averaging around that 49. And the daytime loops were maybe a 51 average over the last couple of days. And then, that fifth day, slowly getting slower and slower times, but he didn't hit a 55. He's 53s, 52s, 51s. And finished on a 53.25. Really fast runner. So for that many yards, it's some really, really.
I mean, that first night's unbelievable.
Nearly
everything's under 40 minutes, except for 2 of them, and they were 40 minutes and 24 and 40 minutes 06. Oh, and 41.05. But he's a gun.
Yeah. So his strategy is fairly similar. If you overlay the shape of some of the other runners, it's fairly similar, but his whole loop time is shifted down because his standard pace must be so much faster.
Yeah.
That a slow loop for him is, not even over 55, where a slow loop for some of the other runners is a 57. And his fast loops were back to back to back. So that first night, 32.46, and then comes back with a 36.42, a 38, a 38, a 38, a 38, a 38.
Yeah.
They're the times I'd run if you got me to do one loop. He's chucking them in on the first night, back to back to back.
And considering how far he went in the race, you'd say he must have been successful with using that time to sleep as well, because to go as far as he did, you'd have to sleep some, and I think he definitely would have banked a lot of sleep, especially earlier in the race.
Yeah. He definitely would have been. Well, he had the time to rest.
Yeah.
Whether he managed to get the resting, because I know that's a different skill, right? But he certainly had the time on the table to rest. Your varies. It's the only graph that looks like his, and it looks like it's backwards,
right?
Because, like we spoke about earlier, it's like he negative split the entire event.
Yeah.
Which, I've tried to do that in a marathon before and failed. And he did it over 107 yards. So that first night he's doing roughly around 53s, a little bit over 53s. And then night time's a bit faster, but he's hovering probably around that 50-minute mark. But then if you skip to his fourth day, so that from 73 onwards, he started running his fastest day loop. So his fastest day loop was actually on the fifth day. So he was getting faster and faster. He ran a 50-51 on the third loop of the fourth day. Didn't break the 50-minute mark, but it was getting pretty close to it. And then on that night, he's running 49s, 48s. He did a 44-59 on the fourth night, that's pretty bloody good. And then on that fifth day, started the fifth day with a 49-42, 54, a 48, a 51. Really, really fast. So, yeah, it's hard to explain how the graph looks, but it looks backwards. It looks like he should have been running those fast times at the start, but instead somehow he's running them on the fifth day.
Yeah, well, I'm just looking at that fifth day now, and one thing that I've noticed is, apart from Harvey Lewis's very last lap, Verries was the only one who ran a sub 50-minute yard.
Yep.
And he did it 1, 2, 3, 4 times.
Yeah, and you saw it in the footage as well, right? So he finished first quite a few times.
Yeah.
And had a fair bit of time to have the cameras on him. So he had a whole heap of that camera time, and it was a whole heap of time for him to rest as well. Did you see when he was talking to his crew when it was down to 2, and he asked, do I have to just keep going? And they said, yeah, you just got to keep going. He's like, well, how long for? And there were 2 crew there with him. One was going the route of saying, you might be here for a while, you just have to keep going. The other one took the different route of saying, well, just one more. That's all you have to do, one more, and then you'll have to do one more again. And he asked, well, will you still be here all that time? And they're like, yeah, we'll stay here. And he's like, what about Laz? Will Laz still be here? And they had to explain to him, well, Laz's house is right there. That's even if he went home, he's just in that building there.
Yeah.
So he seemed really, really with it, but they were talking him through it over those last few hours to, try and explain to him how long it'd go for. I think he felt like he could probably go forever.
He looks like he could.
Yeah, and the numbers show he wasn't getting slower.
Yeah.
But yeah, he didn't know whether he'd be there for an hour or weeks. And he didn't know if everyone would pack up and go, and he'd be left there on his own, just him and Harvey. Which brings us to Harvey Lewis. Awesome guy to win. I was pretty pleased that Harvey took out the win. There's lots of awesome people running, but I think he's sort of a key figure in backyard ultras and a really good advocate.
Well, I think just as far as his backyard ultra resume goes, he's undoubtedly a legend.
Yeah.
If there's one legend, he is it.
Yep. The first entrant into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah. Yeah, the one and only. There's a few Hall of Fame members, but you can elevate him into the legend status. And it might take a little bit of time for someone else to reach that status, but he is the man, isn't he? Like, I love how he talks about how he used to play computer games.
Yep.
And he uses running. He compares running to playing computer games, and he is the game piece.
Yep.
Every race is a different character. I love that analogy.
So his times, looking at the graphs of his times, the first day and first night were pretty straightforward and really consistent. So you look at the times, he's averaging about a 52-minute during the day, and he's averaging about a 44 at night. There's a couple faster ones in there, but pretty consistent across there. The second day was a bit slower, so he's averaging around that 54, but then sped it up at the end of that second day. So when you look, he's got a 45.56 on the last loop of the day, which maybe is a Marin moment to get in early, change his shoes, get ready, get prepared for that night course.
Yeah.
Started the night pretty well. So a 45.31, and then had a 37.51. But then after that, he had, how many loops is this? He had 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 loops over 50 minutes. So from a really fast start, getting that 37.51, he then went into 9 loops over 50 minutes.
Which is a different approach at night time than a lot of the other runners.
Yeah, really different. Which you'd think he couldn't have been getting the sleep some of the other runners were getting.
Yeah.
But then the last 2 loops of the night, obviously still in control, he ran 45.54 and a 44.53.
Yeah.
And then straight into the third day. Then from the third day, it all became one. So there's no marked difference between his day loops and his night loops. There's some fast loops, there's some slow loops, but whether it's day or night, he's coming in roughly around the same time. So 53s, 54s, 55s, there's some 52s.
There's nothing under 50 until the very end then, is there?
Yeah, that's it. There's no blips in his times. There's a couple slightly faster where he's, maybe put the foot down a little bit or did some less walking, more running, but nothing significant all the way from lap 49 through to lap 107. Really, really consistent. And we know why that lap 108 was fast, because he was going to win. So he knew where the finish was and maybe didn't want to risk getting too close to that timer.
It's also interesting. From 102, yard 102, when there were 3 runners left, he was last one in. He was the last one in 102, 103, 104, 105, 106. Then he beat Very's home in 107. And it was after that Very's dropped out. So maybe Harvey beating him home in that 107 is what broke the camel's back for Very's. Like, Very's felt like he wasn't winning anymore, so to speak.
Yeah, that's interesting. Because Very's would have done a lot of finishing first. He would have finished loops first quite a bit when they got down to a few runners, because he was running so fast.
Yeah.
And he was getting that rest. But yeah, to your point on that 107, that's where Harvey didn't really put the foot down too much, but he chucked in a 50:31.
Which is his fastest lap in a long time.
Fastest lap in a long time, yeah, and came in ahead of Very. So
he must have thought, I'm going to have to beat him this lap and see how he responds, I reckon. I can see that 107, that 50:31 or whatever it is his fastest lap since yard 48.
Yep.
That's
one last stat I've left up my sleeve, Pato.
Yeah.
How many loops do you think Harvey Lewis finished first?
One. No. Yes, I'll say one.
Well, 3.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, there's one which is 108. He finished first and last there because he's the only one who did it.
Yeah.
And there's the 107 where he beat Verries.
Yeah.
Outside of that, over the other 106 loops, even when they got down to not many runners, there's only one other loop.
I see.
It's loop 37, yeah, where he finished. Who do you reckon finished the most loops first?
I'll say Verries.
Phil Gore, 24.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, huge. And Sam Harvey was 16.
Right, yeah.
And yeah, like we said earlier, Sam Harvey must be his style to win that first loop. I reckon if I ever do a backyard and Sam Harvey's there, I'm going to sprint my guts out on that first loop, just to see what happens. So that's the numbers. There's heaps more I could talk about. I could talk about numbers forever. Numbers, podcasts, and running are my 3 favorite things, apart from my family and my wife. So awesome. Could talk forever on those, but yeah, what an event and what an amazing story, and it's cool to see that story in the numbers as well.
Yeah, that is awesome analysis. I knew that you would have a lot to talk about, but that was really, really good, really interesting. I reckon everyone will listen to that and think, this guy's amazing.
Either that or they'll fall asleep after the first few minutes of 58, 53, 57. But yeah, it's really cool. And, you know, if the cool thing with numbers, if anyone asks you a question, you can just it pricks up your interest and you can pull it out. So, you know, what happened on lap 47 with this runner? You can dig in and have a look.
Well, that makes me think then, like, what are you going to do with this information? Can runners potentially reach out for you so they can ask questions about their own statistics, or can they reach out to you and ask about other runners' statistics? Are you available for? Are you going to make this public? All this analysis? What are you going to do?
It's a very good question. So I'll still be digging in the numbers for probably a month at least and finding out interesting, cool things. And I'm telling my wife, did you know that, you know, Sam Harvey on lap 23, she won't care, but, you know, I'll still be eager to dig in the numbers and tell someone about it. So, yeah, if anyone wanted to ask a specific question, whether it's a runner or whoever, if they want to know something interesting, they can reach out on Instagram or socials or whatever.
Yep.
I did start an Instagram page, Backyard Ultra Stats.
Ooh, awesome.
I think that's what I call it. Backyard Ultra Stats. Because I figured I'd just post some of the graphs. It's one thing to hear the numbers read out, but it's another thing to just visualize it. So
yeah. Well, I reckon that's really good because, I mean, you can post things like 1 or 2 things a week, leave a few things up your sleeve, but people can also message you and say, can you post a graph about this stat? And here we go.
So I'd be over the moon if any of the runners reached out and said, hey, here's my strategy, because there's data that's not in here, right? when did they eat? When did they eat a meal? What was their strategy? Which you could overlay in these numbers and see the impact of all the things they did. Over the moon, if any of the runners reached out and had some questions about the numbers, happy to dive into whatever they ask. And any other events who have data and they just want to throw it my way, I'd love to dig in and compare. We were saying earlier before we started recording, but that it'd be awesome if we had all the numbers from every backyard ultra event and you could start to compare event versus event. But there are a lot that don't have the timing chips. So there would be limited data to go on.
Yeah. Yeah, well, look, I mean, there are a handful in Australia. So, like, do you think, like, you might start doing this for more races or just special occasions?
Maybe. Depends how exciting they get, but I think they've been getting more and more exciting every event over the last 12 months.
Yeah.
So no doubt I'll be watching, and you can guarantee if I'm watching and there's a place on the internet I can grab the data, I'll be doing some sort of analysis.
Yeah, beauty. Well, that was an awesome chat. I love all this statistic stuff. It just it makes you look at the race a whole different way as well, doesn't it? It makes it so much more, just another whole other element to analyze.
Yeah.
Like Americans would love it. You know how Americans love their stuff?
Hey, when you're commentating the next bigs, when you're the head commentator, and I can be the stats guy in the background that hands you little slips of paper with interesting facts.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Yeah, cool. Well, make sure you send me a message with your new Instagram handle, Backyard Ultra Stats. So I'll tag you in the post in the Instagram.
Yeah, cool. Will do.
And yeah, that's awesome, Tim. Awesome. Great stuff.
Cool. I think I've talked myself out for the day. I think I've done a Backyard Ultra worth of talking.
I think this might be the longest podcast so far, actually.
Yeah,
and one of the best.
Cool. Well, hopefully you have some of the runners on to talk about. Yeah.
Well, look, I'm going to definitely. Well, yeah. Look, I'm going to give them a few days rest till I start breaking their balls asking on the podcast. But yeah, look, I'm looking forward to asking a lot of questions and really because after the Masters, I probably had about a month worth of guests just talking about the Masters. So I reckon I'll probably have about a month worth of guests talking about bigs as well.
Yeah, easily. I'll be listening.
Okay, awesome.
I think a lot of other people are. I think your podcast is one of those ones you'll want to listen to every episode, right? So get them on. If they listen to this, get on Paddo's podcast, because we all want to hear your story. The numbers are one thing, but the like Sam Harvey said, it's the beauty, it's the art. Yeah, that's what we really want to hear about.
Yeah, 100%. All right, Tim. Awesome stuff. Thanks heaps for coming on. I'm so glad you were directed towards those stats so you could start really getting your hands dirty. And you've done a great job. So thanks again. And we'll definitely be in touch. And I'll speak to you later.
Cool. Thanks, Paddo.
All right. See you, mate.
See ya.
If you've enjoyed this podcast, it would be awesome if you could share, comment, like, subscribe, all of that. If you've got any feedback, shoot me a message. Hope you have a great day. See ya.